Alright, let's do the media book freakout tag. My version of this tag, which I've been doing for the past like 2 or 3 years or so, is sort of like a combination of the media book freakout tag as well as the media check-in tag. Both created by different people, so I'll leave all the creators in the description down below. I'm actually a bit late because it's mid-August, but you know, better late than never. Let's just jump straight into the questions. The first is, how many books have you read for the year so far? I've read 22 books for the year so far, which is pretty good by my standards. Last year I only read 15, which was my worst reading year since I started reading as a hobby, so that was, you know, not great. So I'm glad that 2024 is at least looking like it will hopefully be double that, at least. The next question is, what genre have you been predominantly reading? And I would say I mostly read, I guess, what we would call literary fiction, with a few non-fiction books stuck in there. I think I only read 2 YA books this year, one of which was a graphic novel. I actually read 2 graphic novels this year. And what else have I read? I think I've been reading a lot more SFF stuff. I tend to read the more whimsical, not very like hardcore science fiction fantasy kind of books. So that's basically what my year has been. The best book for the year so far, I think without a doubt, would have to go to 1,000 Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. I absolutely fell in love with this book and the story and these characters. I cried so much. I felt every single emotion that it was possible to feel while reading this book. I was furious, I was anxious, I was sad, I was happy in some moments. And I just thought that it was a beautiful love letter to Afghanistan. It's such an incredible book. Like, I mean, I don't even need to talk about it more because at this point, if you haven't read Khaled Hosseini, you just need to read Khaled Hosseini. Okay. I don't know what took me so long. So that was definitely the best book that I read this year, but if I had to say like what the best YA book that I read this year was and the best non-fiction book that I read this year, the best YA book, which again was the only YA book that I read this year really that wasn't a graphic novel, it was Where the Streets Had a Name by Randa Abdel Fattah, which takes place in Palestine. It's about this young girl who tries to sneak over from the West Bank into West Jerusalem to retrieve soil from the property that her grandmother used to live on before she was displaced during the Nakba, because her grandmother had this wish of, before she died, she would like to touch the soil of the land that she came from, and that's what the main character tries to do. And it was such a beautiful story that really explored the ways in which Palestinians' mobility is heavily limited and policed by the Israeli occupation. And the best non-fiction book that I read this year was definitely Azadi by Arundhati Roy, Freedom, Fascism and Fiction. This was hands down incredible. Arundhati Roy is just a fantastic writer, and this was such a beautiful sort of exploration and critique of the rise of the right-wing nationalist Hindutva state in India and how that impedes on the lives of other people in India. She just had a lot of like poignant things to say in here, and I definitely want to read more from this author. Next up we have The Biggest Surprise, and I don't know if I have an answer for this. For me, a surprise is a book that I didn't really expect much from, but that I ended up really liking more than I expected to. I mean, I can't think of a great answer, but I guess if I had to pick one, I'd go with Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I really liked this book, and I expected to like it, but I didn't expect for it to... Yeah, no, this is not the right answer. I don't know. I don't think I have an answer for this question. Nothing really surprised me this year. Okay, the worst book that I read this year would speaking of Jane Eyre, would have to be White Sargasso Sea by Jean Rhys. I didn't hate this book by any means, and I don't think it was bad. I just don't think it was for me. I'll talk about it a little bit more in my August wrap-up, but basically this is sort of like a background to Bertha Mason, the woman in the attic from Jane Eyre. Her life growing up in the Caribbean, and it's about how she ends up meeting Rochester. Most of the book ends up taking place from Rochester's perspective, and I guess maybe this could be my surprise. I actually really expected to like this book, and I didn't. Okay, we'll call this the biggest surprise and the biggest disappointment, actually. Yeah, I just felt like I did not really care to read from Rochester's perspective, and half of this book was from his perspective. I also didn't really like the portrayal of black people in this book. There was many things I just did not like about this book. And yeah, again, I'll talk about it more in my August wrap-up. But White Sargasso Sea, the best sequel that I read this year, I guess honestly, the only like quote-unquote series that I've been reading this year, and I honestly have not read past the 3rd book, is the Wayward Children series by Shannon Maguire. This is the 1st book, this is the 2nd, this is the 3rd. I didn't really love the 3rd book so much, but I really did like the 2nd book. So I guess this is really the only book that I could answer this question with. It's a fantasy series about children who get lost down rabbit holes and go to fantasy worlds and then through some, unfortunate circumstances, they end up returning to Earth and they don't like it and they hate it, and so they go to this boarding school that sort of helps them to rehabilitate and readjust to our world, I suppose. And yeah, it's good so far, but the second book was really a standout for me, and that's just because it follows, I think, two of the most interesting characters in this series. Best book to movie adaptation. So I would have left this out normally because I don't usually watch book to movie adaptations, and I actually didn't watch one this year. But because I read Miss Jane Eyre, I would like to know which of the adaptations y'all think I should watch. My friend highly recommended the 2006 BBC series, and so I definitely want to watch that. But if you have a favorite or a recommendation of an adaptation of this book, I know there are probably many, I would love those recommendations down below. I also believe that Wide Sargasso Sea has been adapted, but I'm not sure that I care to watch that. The next question is a book that made you cry, and let's go back to this for a second. I cried. The last line of this book especially took me out. It is a really, really sad story. It's really frustrating, it's really infuriating, but it's also beautiful. I don't know why Khaled Hosseini did this to me. The next question is a new to you author that you've been really enjoying, and for me, I'm going to have to say Rivers Solomon. So I picked up An Unkindness of Ghosts by Rivers Solomon last month in July, and I really, really loved it. I've had this book for years, and I tried to read it twice, and I gave up on it, and this time around I listened to the audio while reading along with the physical copy, and that worked for me. And then I went ahead and I read The Deep, because I went to the library to return some other books that I had, and I wasn't planning on borrowing anything else from the library, and I looked straight ahead on this new table filled with new books that they recently got in, and The Deep was like in the center of the table, and I was like, I just read a book from that author, I want to read this one now. And I really, really love both of these stories. They're quite different. This one is a generation ship sci-fi novel, whereas this one is more of a fantasy novel that takes place underwater, but both of them deal with themes of memory and past and trauma and learning your history and learning your past to pave the way properly for your future. Like, if you want to get into more SFF, but specifically Afrofuturism, I think Rivers Solomon is just like a must read for you. Next up, we have the most beautiful book that you got this year. And I will say that that's probably going to have to go to one of the graphic novels that I read this year, and I talked about this on my channel so many times already. This is Shabaik Labaik by Dina Mohammed. Beautiful graphic novel, incredible art, incredible story. Takes place in this alternate Cairo where you can actually purchase wishes in bottles, and it explores basically how a reality like that would look in our world as we know it today in very unique and interesting ways. It ends up being a fantastic commentary on things like class and religion, international politics. It goes into directions that you would not have expected. In fact, this could have been the answer for a surprising book, because I was really surprised by how far this story went in terms of what it was addressing. And did I mention the art is gorgeous? I feel like I haven't mentioned the art is mosquito. We have a dengue outbreak right now, and I'm trying to deal with these mosquitoes as they're coming into my room. It is very, very annoying. The next question is a bookish highlight for the year, like the best bookish highlight. I don't think I had a highlight for the year in terms of reading or books so far. What I will say though is that the past 2 months I've been reading a lot. More than I usually do. So to give you an example, statistics, right? So I've read 22 books for the year. Half of those books, 11 of them, I read between January and June. So it took me 6 months to get through 11 books. And for the past 2 months, I read 11 more books. I read 5 books last month, and I've already read 6 books in August so far. So I think my bookish highlight of the year is just really the last 2 months, because for some reason, I've just been reading a lot more. I don't know why, and I'm not complaining. My next biggest priority is to just really focus on reading the books that I have to read for school. I've been sort of starting books for school and not finishing them. Other than that, what else do I care to read for the rest of the year? I don't have any other thing that I'm really planning to read or anything like that. I've really just been enjoying reading whatever I want to read whenever I want to read it. I think that's been working out for me really well so far for the past 2 months, and I think I'm just going to stick to that. And that's it. That's my mid-year book check-in. That's not really the mid-year. It's more this is like a 2/3 of the year book freakout. In honor of my favorite book of the year, feel free to leave a sun emoji or a sunrise or a sunset or something like that. I'm going to go now. Thank you so much for watching. And until next time, let me fix this properly. Yes. Okay. Until next time, inshallah, keep reading.